I'm a walk-in.
Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. Can I have a motion? I don't even have to? There we go. So I guess the next thing I'm doing is put my glasses on. It's not written there, so maybe I should. Looking for some declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, before we come to the delegations, I'll just provide you with some opening remarks. Welcome, everyone. This is the first of two public input meetings from the 2020 regional budget. The purpose of the meeting is for residents of the Waterloo region to share their views with members of Budget Committee. No decisions will be made at this meeting. Members of the public are encouraged to provide their comments and input on the value of the current service levels and proposed service enhancements in the 2020 budget. Notice of the 2020 budget meetings was given 21 days in advance through advertisements in the local print media, including the Record, as well as through the region's website. Additionally, the region has adopted an online engagement strategy, and residents are encouraged to provide input by visiting engageregionofwaterloo.ca. The online survey went live on Thursday, November 21st, and will continue until Friday, December 20th. For those delegations who registered prior to the deadline, you will have 10 minutes to speak. Mike Boos. If you registered after the deadline, and if you haven't registered in advance of this meeting and you would like to speak today, you will have a limit of 5 minutes to speak. The next planned budget public input meeting will be on Wednesday, December 11th at 6 p.m. Final budget approval will take place on Wednesday, January 22nd of 2020, but no delegations will be heard at that meeting. Whether you appear as a delegation before this committee or not, I'd like to thank you for your interest and participation in the budget review process. Where is everybody? Oh. Hi, Mike. Welcome. Oh, okay.
Good evening, member. Oh, let me see. Can I get that? Can you all hear me? Good evening, members of council. With the successful launch of ION this year, we became conscious of a new concept in transit: fare evasion. Due to all-door boarding, it's now possible to hop on a train without having paid anything. To discourage fare dodging, we've deployed security guards to inspect for proof of payment and deliver sometimes overly harsh fines to those who haven't paid. We enforce against this kind of fare evasion not because fare evasion has much of an impact on our transit revenues, but because it disrupts our sense of fairness. The idea that someone might be getting a free ride without pulling their own weight when everyone else has pitched in their fair share. We enforce to remind everyone that there is no free ride. I'm sorry to report, however, that there's another form of fare evasion, one that, unlike the kind that we can enforce against, is in fact deeply perilous to our transit system, shortchanging our operational capacity by potentially millions of dollars. A fare evasion that would crowd our trains and buses far more than any freeloaders, or worse, keep paying passengers away. Unfortunately, we don't have any fare inspectors, don't have any fines to deter this kind of evasion. I'm talking, of course, about when local government doesn't live up to its commitments to funding transit. We have a business plan for Grand River Transit to guide our investments over the next few years. In its original form, staff projected a ridership of 28 million passengers per year by 2021. Council opted to pare down the implementation by nearly a third of its originally intended pace, delaying ridership targets to 2023. And by the looks of the budget papers, it appears we're further poised to slash what's left of the GRT business plan for this year by more than half. But while there's no fine or hired security guards to enforce against government's shortchanging transit, I'm sorry to say there's still no free ride. We can't credibly declare a climate emergency and then fail to invest in sustainable transportation. We can't claim to be concerned about rising inequality and then stand in the way of making transportation more accessible, while shifting a greater burden of the costs onto its users. We cannot build an amazing light rail rapid transit system expecting ridership to grow, and then failed to provide the necessary connecting routes to get to the line. There is no free ride. Building a sustainable, equitable, and useful transit system brings tremendous value to our region. But in order to realize that value, the region can't evade paying its fair share. Please ensure that the approved GRT business plan is fully carried out in the 2020 budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. I'm not seeing any questions. You even have some minutes to spare. I appreciate that. Still waiting, but I don't see any questions. So thank you very much for your presentation today and coming out.
Thank you.
And Tim Mollison? And Tim, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Members of council, and, okay. It's been, probably due, but I do want to make sure I keep my stopwatch just so that, okay. So, hi everyone. So I'm here today to provide what I feel is a unique perspective on some of the things that are being considered in this year's regional budget. So I live at Queen and Cortland at Bread and Roses Cooperative Homes, and pretty much every ambulance headed to or from St. Mary's out of downtown goes past my home. And I note that this year, GRT's business plan and the paramedic services are both being proposed for a haircut in order to meet an arbitrary 3% target on changes to tax. I find that interesting because I'm still living in a cooperative that is charged less than $1,000 per household in property tax in total. And if you compare that to your average homeowner in Waterloo region, that's low. And I'm here today to sort of ask that instead of hewing to this arbitrary target, we talk about perhaps charging the right amount of money to provide the right amount of services for our growing region. So I used to actually both live and work downtown, but in advocating for LRT, both personally and as part of a group, I also caused land value uplift that resulted in my employer moving its operations to the edge of town. This, again, the site definitely needed a refresh. It's a beautiful new location. We have a couple of clients. We have, really good place to work, but it's got a huge transport bottleneck, and it takes me about an hour to get from home to work now, and it's resulted in some challenges in hiring. And I bring this up because the GRT business plan could be one way to solve some of the bottlenecks, particularly the fact that right now GRT doesn't provide bus service in the middle of the day during the summer when we have a significant number of schedules starting or finishing. I actually work as a scheduler, so I have access to this information. And while we do communicate with regional staff on this matter, it still always comes down to how many service hours are funded. And so when I see issue papers that are talking about meeting an arbitrary target of an inflation amount, but doing that on the back of 15,000 service hours rather than the 50,000 service hours, I look at that and I go, well, where are the priorities going to be, and how is this going to impact our ability to employ people in Waterloo region? So, I think that I understand that you have a difficult task, okay? You have a lot of different people with a lot of different priorities. Some of them are about life safety, okay? And you have this sense that that people can only afford so much. But I will tell you, show me somebody who cannot afford a $25 marginal increase on their annual tax bill, and I will show you someone who failed their CMHC stress test on their mortgage. Like, we have to be realistic about what it is that we need to grow, because we have started a process, we have struck a match that is lighting our property market on fire. It is absolutely booming here, and we need to make sure that we're getting out ahead of that growth. And so part of getting ahead of that growth is continuing to sell transit as a viable option, which means continuing to provide new service hours to transit. And it's also to make, of course, to make sure that people, when they're in an emergency, have access to paramedics. So again, as much as I respect that council can set targets such as 3%, I would ask that when you're looking at some of these things, consider not just whether or not 3% is the perfect number or that you must hew to that number, but please consider also, what does our growing city need? What does our growing region need? What investments will pay dividends in the future? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tim. I'm seeing no questions. I appreciate you coming out this evening and certainly your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So at this particular point in time, I can't really see anybody, but I'm wondering if there's anybody that would like to speak. I'm calling a last call for delegations. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I'm looking for a motion. Oh, sorry, there's no communications, no other business. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Thank you for that. All of those in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, everyone, for your time this evening. Thanks, staff, for a lovely dinner.